Hello, hello, hello. Hi there, all my safety friends. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Bryce Sargent. I've been a safety professional for 20 years, and I actually had an additional 6 years where it was just part of my job. And I have coached and trained over 100 safety managers in like the last 2 or 3 years. It's pretty incredible. And my passion is teaching people how to get management support for their safety program. I love the psychology of safety, and I love building a safety culture. So anyway, what we are talking about today is using stories to get support for your safety message. And what I like to say is that facts tell, but stories, they sell. Right. And it is our job. It's our job as safety managers to sell safety. We need to not just sell it to the employees to get them to work safer, but we need to sell it to the management team to get them to realize that safety is one of the most important departments that they have. And it's up to us as safety professionals to sell safety. So the way that you sell it, a lot of us love to use data and statistics and dollar signs, but those are facts. And facts just tell, but the stories, they sell. So I was recently taking a class. Somebody mentioned that you really need to tell your story. Just telling them that you have 20 years experience doesn't really do it. Story, which if you want to know my story, you can go to the website. I also have a podcast on it and all of that good stuff. Everything I hear, I'm always trying to relate it to what we do. Everything that you learn can be related to several different things, not just to safety or just to whatever it is that they're talking about. And it made me think about this time where I was working with he was an expert in environmental safety. So like EPA, think about things like that. He was very, very good at what he did. He was super, super intelligent. And he's doing these presentations. And to me, they were amazing because I have an analytical brain. I answer to data. I love data. That makes me really pay attention. But he wasn't getting his message across. As much as he was trying to convince people to do the right thing, he was having a hard time getting his message across. That's what I was thinking about when I heard facts tell, but stories sell. And it is that makes us realize that we really need to be telling the story behind safety. And now, who do we do this with? Now, I already mentioned it's your job to sell safety. You can use this with anything. You can use it with your management team. You can use it with your executives. You can use it with your employees. It's not a bad idea to tell them about the facts and the statistics and the data and all that good stuff. But just understand you've got to back it up with a story that's going to get to their why. It's going to get into why it is important to them to listen. The problem with just using data is that in their mind, they don't believe they will get caught. So if I tell them, well, it's a $12,000 fine times, the 50 employees that work here. And they're like, well, okay, when would I get this fine? Well, it would be like if OSHA came in or a regulatory body came in, then you would get fined for it. Well, what's the chances of that regulatory body coming in? Well, unless there's a complaint or somebody is in imminent danger, the percentage of a regulatory body walking in could be relatively low. As a member of management, as an employee doing the task, they're going to weigh like, what's the chance of me actually getting caught? And can I just keep doing it the way I want to do it? Can I save money by not putting this policy or procedure in place? They can, right? So what I like to think about is that even if you just tell them a 95% chance that you're going to get caught, there's a 5% chance I'm not. Using that data, you have to really sell them on why it's important, because just using the data is not going to convince them. So when I say stories sell, a lot of safety managers might be thinking, oh, I got to tell them about an incident I heard about related to this type of policy, procedure, regulation, whatever, maybe an injury or an incident or some awful horror story. We as safety managers, we have horror stories and we love to talk horror stories. And there's nothing wrong with using that as your story. The problem is when you constantly do that, then it becomes background noise. It becomes where they're not going to listen to you because every time Bri comes to try to convince us about something, she's got some crazy story that has happened in the past. So you can't always be using your horror stories. I want to tell you a story as showing how this has worked in the past with me. So I used to put out this employee newsletter, and this one time I was extremely late putting it out. And not that I didn't curate content from the internet for it in the past, but this particular time, the majority of the newsletter I had curated from another website. And what the story was that there was a forklift operator who was putting a pallet into the back of a truck. And when he did, a delivery driver, and it wasn't the driver itself, it was like a helper or somebody like that, walked in between the forklift pallet and the truck entrance. So she got shoved into the back of the truck between the two pallets. And then that truck leaves because it wasn't her truck. That truck leaves and it goes to make its delivery of lettuce, actually, is what it was. It was a pallet of lettuce. So when they're unloading the lettuce at the next place, a couple days later or hours later, whatever it was, they found her body because she was asphyxiated from being squished between the two pallets. So I shared that story. I heard that story from my forklift operators for months. For months, they brought that back up to me. Every time I was talking to them about something, they're like, I can't get that story out of my mind. I never even thought that was possible. I never even realized why it was so important not to walk in front of a forklift. I didn't even think like that could happen to anybody. That story really sold that policy, that procedure, that safe work practice to those employees, and it stuck with them in the heart. And that kind of made me realize that that's how stories sell. It made these young forklift operators, the thing with young people, very strong, do a lot of work, they have good stamina, but they think nothing can happen to them. They think they're superheroes, right? The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet, and they have no idea of the risks of some of the things that they're getting involved in. So it made a lot of these young forklift operators realize that, hey, yeah, this could happen to me. So that's where stories really work. I mean, I've been telling them over and over again, as a pedestrian, you don't walk in front of a forklift, and this is why. But them hearing how this happened to somebody and just the horrible circumstances behind it, it really worked. So that's how you can use your horror stories or your incident stories to help you sell safety. But the problem is when you do that over and over again, it becomes mundane, becomes this background noise, and they don't always hear it. Other ways that you can use stories to sell safety is to be talking about the benefits of whatever it is that you're trying to convince them of. You have to tell them how it's going to make them personally feel, how it's going to benefit them personally. Going back to my friend who's the environmental manager, he's trying to get a stormwater plan in place. A stormwater plan, if you hire it out and have it done correctly, it's like $3,000-$5,000, depending on the size of your facility, right? The management team who has to approve that purchase, even though it's a regulation and they have to have it anyway, they're weighing, am I going to get caught? And then what's the fine for me getting caught? Can I compare that fine to the cost of the program, which is more? I mean, they do the math. Doing the right thing doesn't necessarily motivate them. It motivates me because that's an intrinsic core value of mine, but it doesn't necessarily motivate everybody else. So you have to think of a story that makes getting that plan in place important to them. You could say things like cleaning up the debris will make the facility look really, really good and more presentable to customers, right? So if we're doing this the right way, we're going to stay in business. So that way we don't have to worry about a work stoppage. Or can you imagine how much more efficient we can all work when everything is done the way that it's supposed to be done and work is done within designated areas? Or we'll have less worry when we know that we're doing it right. So we won't have that weight on our shoulders of the concern that a regulatory body can come in and we're going to get fined. So try to mix that stuff into your sales strategy. So when you're trying to get a program approved or you're trying to get somebody to work the right way, try to mix in what are the benefits to them and how is this going to make them feel when it is done correctly. And I used to do this a lot with back injuries too. So I would go up to a worker who was lifting incorrectly and I would say, hey, Mark, I read this study that if you lifted this way or that way, and we do a couple of demonstrations, and I go, can you do me a favor? Can you try it out for like 90 minutes and let me know how you feel? And then I'll come back and I'll ask you, which way was better. I would love to know if that article that I read was actually correct and if it had any impact on you. So doing it that way actually helped them practice basically the proper lifting and got them to see the benefit to them and then change their lifting in the future. You can apply this to pretty much anything that you want to promote within your workplace. Think about every single program, every single policy and procedure. What I would recommend you do is make a list. How is it going to benefit that employee? And then focus on that. Always pick a different one. But remember, focus on the benefits. You can give them data within those benefits. That's fine, because then that would relate to the people who are more data people. But try to keep most of your data and your data reporting to reports. So posting them up on your break room monitors, giving them out at your safety committee meetings, at your staff meetings, your executive advisory meetings. Try to keep the data to that area and not to your conversations. And definitely not when you're trying to sell them on something. Have the data available. Maybe make it one slide of data, but have most of it focus on what are the benefits to them, what are the benefits to the organization, and especially, how is it going to help us improve sales? Because if you're not selling, there's no reason to have a safety program anyway. So whatever it is, your product or anything that you do, whatever your company's deliverable is and how they make money, how is it going to benefit that as well? That was all that I had for you. Put a post in the comments below and let me know what you think.